Over the years, Sony Santa Monica have accomplished a lot of great things with the God of War franchise, and as we get ready to step into the next chapter of the series, perhaps it's time to look back at those things. And what exactly are they? The epic, adrenaline-fueled music? The brutal, thrilling action? The buckets of blood and gore? Kratos' bald and angry head? Well, sure, all those things are great. But the one thing that the series has absolutely and consistently nailed through the years has to be its boss fights. We're hopeful that this year's entry will continue that tradition, but we obviously won't know for sure until we've actually played the game. So here in this feature, we're going to take a look at the 15 best boss fights in the entire series. If you disagree with any of our picks, feel free to let us know in the comments section below. Without further ado, let's begin. And warning, there are spoilers ahead. Barbarian King, God of War 2. Barbarian King Alric, the very same Barbarian King Kratos almost lost his life to, until 10 years before the events of the series, right before he sold his soul to Ares. The Barbarian King is a central figure in Kratos' life, and the chance to square off against him to settle an old score is thrilling. Add to that how cinematic the battle is and the great music, and it's easy to see why this one found a place on our list. Thanatos, God of War, Ghost of Sparta. Ghost of Sparta was brimming with memorable boss fights, but the final encounter against Thanatos has to be the very best. As a boss fight itself, its strength lies in just how friggin' cool and how cinematic it was, but it was good for so many other reasons. Most of all because of the context that lay behind it. Seeing Kratos finally meet up with his long-lost brother, and then seeing the two of them work together to kill Thanatos was incredibly satisfying, making for an excellent payoff to a brilliant game. Hermes, God of War 3. If you only look at the actual one-on-one combat between Kratos and Hermes in isolation, it isn't all that special. Sure, it looks great and visceral, and the quick time events are really good as well, but it's nothing special as a boss encounter. It's when you look at the entire encounter against Hermes as a whole that you truly start to appreciate it for how good it is. The chase leading up to the actual fight is amazing, while having the chance to rip off Hermes' legs and then steal his boots is just icing on the cake. Aegeon the Hecaton Kyries, God of War Ascension. Ascension simply knocked it out of the park with its first 30 minutes. Kratos' multi-legged fight against the Fury Majera and Aegeon the Hecaton Kyries was an epic, action-packed battle that pushed the boundaries of the PS3 in so many ways. Sure, it may not match the scope of some other battles in the series, such as the one against CRONOS, and it may not be as laden with context as some of Kratos' other duels, including the likes of Persephone, but it was still the highlight of what was otherwise a somewhat disappointing game. KRAKEN, God of War 2. The fight against the Kraken isn't one that does anything you haven't ever seen in terms of design or scope, but damn it, if it isn't one of the single best encounters in the entire series. It is at the same time both a puzzle and a boss fight, with the player having to systematically chop off the Kraken's tentacles before eventually dealing the final blow by literally diving the tip of an entire bridge through its skull. It's an excellent, brutal encounter that undoubtedly ranks as one of the best in the series. Sisters of Fate, LAKHESIS and ATROPOS, God of War 2. The epic, Herculean odyssey that Kratos undertakes in the game culminates with him facing off against the Sisters of Fate, or two of them anyway. Kratos finds himself not only having to fight them, but also his past as he's hurled through the mirrors of fate and transported to the horrors that occurred in his life before. Of course, he does emerge triumphant after the ordeal, or so you'd think, because of course there's more to come after this. Zeus, God of War 3. Kratos' final fight against Zeus was the culmination of everything we'd seen in the franchise up until that point. The ultimate payoff to the Spartans' exhausting lust for revenge, and boy was it everything we'd hoped for. From a side-scrolling, up-close and personal fight, to an epic duel with a Zeus making use of all his terrifying abilities, to continuing that fight inside the heart of Gaia, to a trip into Kratos' psyche. The final fight against the King of Olympus was every bit as good as the conclusion to the series should have been. Persephone and Atlas, God of War, Chains of Olympus. The final boss fight from the excellent Chains of Olympus was amazing for so many reasons. From the emotional moments with Kratos' daughter leading up to the fight, to the actual multi-layered epic battle itself against both Persephone and the Titan Atlas, all elements came together almost perfectly. It was a near-perfect way to end the game, and it checked off all the boxes you'd expect from a boss fight from this series. It was ridiculously cinematic, incredibly epic, and thrilling to its very core. Just like Chains of Olympus itself, this boss fight deserves a lot more love than it actually gets from the fanbase. Pandora's Guardian, God of War. The original game didn't have quite as many boss battles as the sequels would go on to have, but the ones it did have were fantastic. And while the spectacle of Hydra bosses is undeniable, the boss battle against the massive Minotaur in Pandora's Temple holds a special place in our hearts. From the slow build-up, you start solving a multiple stage puzzle throughout the temple that eventually unleashes it, to the elaborate and involved battle. It's almost Zelda-esque in asking you to leverage patterns to take it down, to the excellent music that plays during the fight, and of course, the Guardian's great design. Hercules, God of War 3. Also known as one of the 3,000 times Kratos kills a family member. Though, for a man who's killed his own father, sister, wife, and daughter, among others, would a half-brother even count as family? Oh well, not that it matters. Though, in context of Kratos' other big battles throughout the course of the series, Hercules may not seem like a very formidable foe. The fight against him is actually really cool. Besting the super strong champion and then using his own gauntlets to finish him off, before crushing him under a balcony, is strangely cathartic. The fact that the gauntlets you get as a reward for killing him are among the best weapons in the entire series also definitely sweetens the deal. Hades, God of War 3. Coming up against the Lord of the Underworld in a 1 versus 1 battle is just as amazing and daunting as you expect it to be. Surrounded by fights against the likes of Poseidon and Cronos, the boss fight against Hades often gets overlooked, and we feel that's a little unfair because this is without a doubt one of the best battles in the franchise. Hades has a lot of moves at his disposal, and he gets progressively stronger as the battle continues, so players are forced to use multiple moves, dodges, and weapons in order to beat him. It's a thrilling and electrifying fight, and finishing it off by tearing the soul out of his body was downright brilliant. Hydra, God of War. This boss battle was perfect in so many ways. It served as the perfect introduction. It was also a very well designed encounter. It had escalation, and it had some excellent quick-time events. The way Kratos finished off the beast by impaling it on the mast of a ship was immensely satisfying. Everything about it was just so damn good, to the extent that even now, more than a decade after we first played it, it's still seared into our memories. Poseidon, God of War 3. Right from its opening moments, it was made perfectly clear that it was going to be a game like no other. A game of massive size and scope that'll constantly make your jaw drop right out of its socket. It did so by pitting you against Poseidon in its opening moments. As if being able to constantly see the stunning battles in the background wasn't enough, this sequence also saw Kratos battling against a fully powered Poseidon. To make things even better, the game chose to end the boss fight with an absolutely brilliant scene of Kratos beating the Olympian into a pulp before literally gouging his eyes out. Colossus of Rhodes, God of War 2. The boss battle against the Colossus of Rhodes was, like so many other encounters throughout the series, a multi-legged encounter, but it was the variety in terms of design and scenery throughout these various legs that made it truly special. From destroying the Colossus's eyes and destroying its mechanical innards to some epic quicktime event sequences and severing its gargantuan arm, the opening boss fight provided some of the most memorable moments in not only the entire game, but the entire series as a whole. CRONOS, God of War 3. Kratos' iconic battle against CRONOS, a little over halfway through the game, qualifies as not only the best boss fight in the entire series, but also possibly the single greatest sequence across the course of the franchise. Well, so far. It's while you're hacking away at scores of tiny enemies on Cronos' shoulder midway through the battle, and the camera pans out to reveal that you're literally nothing but a tiny speck in comparison to the guy you're trying to bring down, that the massive scope of this fight truly crashes down on you. From impaling him with chains, to breaking his fingernail, to literally being swallowed by him whole, this has to be the most well-designed 30 minutes we've ever played in an action game.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.